We continue our 2022 season preview for Georgia Southern football, and we dive into the defensive side of the ball, and it's one that everybody talks about the changes in the offense. There's a good amount of change on defense as well. You look at kind of the scheme, and you got to see it this past weekend. Yeah. There are changes. It's not anything that's a wholesale drastic. I mean, you're going to see probably more 5 DBs in the mix of everything, but if that's the biggest thing that changes, I think you're pretty good with it.
And from a window dressing standpoint, there's going to be a lot of things that look similar to what Eagle Nation has seen for the last number of years. It's just about different personnel groupings. And you mentioned with 5 defensive backs, that's the natural nickel. We've seen Tyler Bride step in as the number 1 there, but the Ole Miss transfer Jalen Denton can be the number 1 nickel. He's also been the number 1 dime guy. A lot of situations with 6 defensive backs, which means that in some cases you're only having 1 linebacker. And somebody I will say that I've been really, really happy to see have a very strong camp. Finally, Todd Bradley Glenn.
Yes.
He has had a whale of a camp. I think he's in the best shape of his career. Getting one more opportunity. Let's hope that all of what has happened to him is finally out of the way. He has shown time and time again that he can defeat whatever adversity is in front of him. It is time for that guy to have a full season so he can show himself, this team, and the Sun Belt Conference what number 1 can really do.
We kind of go position group by position group. You look at the defensive line, and a lot of the same names across the front. Justin Ellis, Parker Devine, Dylan Springer, everybody knows. But you add in a guy like Christian Varner transferring in from North Carolina. He's had to battle injuries a little bit in the camp, but has been back the last couple of days, and that's a pretty stout front 4 if you're Georgia Southern.
This was something we talked about with Rip Rowan earlier last week when you're a first-year coach, but your defensive ends, your starting defensive ends are 6th-year guys, and one of them happens to be Dylan Springer, maybe our favorite player that we have ever covered in any sport. Justin Ellis, no slouch as well. I think he's going to have a chance to get on some NFL draft boards if he has the kind of season that he's being groomed to. You can't buy that kind of experience. You can't simply say, all those snaps on this side, all those snaps on this side, and I'm going to get a nearly 300-pounder that went to Hiram High School to be in the middle of this defense. Now, sometimes he's going to be that hole plugger, that fire plug, if you will, if they're going to go 3-man front, because they will be multiple with 3 and 4, but he's going to get a chance to team up on the inside with Trayvon Locke at Benedictine. He's been on the roster for a couple of years. Looks like he may be poised to break out. It's somebody that's gotten a lot of time lately is L.J. McLeod.
Yeah.
So I would expect him to be heavily involved as we get into the opening stages of the season.
And that's something, you look at the quote-unquote 2s in this defensive line, and Georgia Southern has seen it for years, where you're constantly trying to cycle defensive linemen in, especially with teams that want to go as fast as different teams in the Sun Belt do. You look at a guy like Quinn Williams. You mentioned Locke, McLeod, Isaac Walker, guys that have been in this program for a number of years. Now it's time for them to take that next step and really get into the mix.
I'll spend a moment on Quinn because he's somebody that, remember, was at one point the highest recruit ever in the Sun Belt Conference going into the 2018 season. It feels like that this is by far going to be his best year. He's up to 270 pounds. He could still play that outside linebacker if need be, but it seems like he's been in more of that rush capacity. Some different terminology with the guys that are going to be able to rush on the edges with the verbiage that Rip Rowan has used. Sometimes he'll drop back, sometimes he will be rushing, but he looks as impressive as he has since he got on campus. Remember, he had the acrobatic pick 6 against Arkansas State a year ago, and we've seen what he can do in spurts. The Minnesota game, the Appalachian State game. It feels like he's going to be able to put that together this year with a new scheme, and I'm really excited to watch him.
Linebacker-wise, it was probably, I don't want to say the most turnover, because you've got Todd Bradley Glenn, Kadri Jackson that you've seen the last year or so in this program. Todd Bradley Glenn for the last, what seems like 27 years.
And he has one more year if he wants it. He has another year. He could be an 8th-year guy if he wants it.
That's crazy. Somebody called Grant Weatherford. But you have those guys. You had a number of different linebackers leave, but a guy like Jalen Jackson, Marquez Watson-Trent is somebody that we've heard about the last few years, but being able to finally get in the mix, you've heard me say this a lot. I'm a big fan of Jalen Jackson. He is somebody that if you're going up the middle, you don't want him to be the one meeting you. But I think he's the guy that is going to be flying under the radar no pun intended, but flying under the radar, and is going to have a really big year for this team.
And he's somebody that's changed positions. They tried him at defensive end, but now he looks like he's working at an inside linebacker and will be up front. That's the position that probably has the least amount of depth on the defense. Those two inside backers, you've got a new position coach at Aaron Schwans, who worked with Rowan and Will Harris at Washington. We already mentioned about Todd. With Watson Trent, we only really have seen him for 3.5 quarters defensively. He was a special team of the year before, tore the ACL against Gardner-Webb. He's back. He has had a really good camp. He's been filtered in with the ones a little bit, but predominantly with the twos. In the case of Todd and Kadri, though, you've got guys that either missed all of last year or missed significant time. Kadri had that knee injury that cost him 5 games last year.
Yeah.
He's been a pleasant surprise. With Jalen, though, going from a rush linebacker to a defensive end to now somebody that looks like he's going to work in the middle of that defense, make sure that guys are in the right spot. I would say that he's another one that's due for a big step forward. Somebody that's been involved since day one because he played a lot as a freshman, but I think that he gets significant steps and he's going to see his stats really increase.
A group that was kind of the focus, and Coach Helton has talked about it a lot, that was going to be the big key of getting more depth into it, was the defensive backs. And we talked about it, especially when you're trying to go more 5, more 6 DBs this year. You know you're getting Derek Canteen back, which you and I have talked a lot. I think this is going to be a gigantic year for Derek Canteen. You know what you've got in Justin Birdsong and Anthony Wilson. Tyler Bride, you mentioned being more of that nickel back for Georgia Southern. A guy like Seth Robertson came on towards the end of last year when he needed to, when a couple of injuries forced him into the scheme. But you've got a number of transfers in this group as well that can come in and make an immediate impact. You talked about Jalen Denton coming in from Ole Miss. You've got Wingard coming in from Elon. A number of different guys that can have a really big impact. And again, another group that you need depth in, especially in this league.
And somebody that's worked his way to the top of the depth chart at safety is the Fresno State transfer in Waylon Free. Now, he is a 6th-year senior. He was part of 2 double-digit win seasons at Fresno State, one for Jeff Tedford, last year for Kalen DeBoer. But the numbers went down a little bit. His stats decreased. He had a great first couple of years. But now, after kind of splitting those reps with Justin Birdsong at safety, it looks like you could pencil him in at the moment as that safety alongside Anthony Wilson. He's flexible enough that he could play the nickel, could play the dime, and something that Coach Harris has done with a number of these DBs, they're getting cross-trained. So if they have to step in at corner, it's not something they're going to do a lot of, but a rep here, a rep there, learning different positions so that you can rotate guys. And if you would see Tyler Bride starting a nickel, don't be shocked if he would bump back to safety.
Yeah.
The Darrell Baker Jr. philosophy where you could just play everywhere and not miss a beat. This is a scheme where these guys can learn responsibilities and they're not going to be bogged down by trying to understand how exotic these coverages are. So it's a scheme that's easily understandable, and when you've got a bunch of guys, especially a number of transfers that are trying to learn where they need to be, that's the way to approach this. And for somebody like Harris, who's a first-time D coordinator, got to make sure he's in line as well.
The thing that I like about these transfers as well, you mentioned Free being a 6th-year guy. You've got a lot of experience, not necessarily at Georgia Southern in this DB room, but a lot of collegiate experience in this room, and that's only going to benefit some of the younger guys that you've also got in this room, like a Tyrell Davis, a Quincy Bonner, who have been a part of this program, but now learning from a couple of new folks.
And something that I've really noticed about this secondary, this is going to sound kind of silly, this might be the tallest secondary that Georgia Southern has had, because most of the time you're dealing with 5'9", 5'10". Every now and then you get a 5'11" guy. I thought back to a couple of years, Nick Wright, the quarterback, was 6 feet, and I couldn't think of anybody that was that tall playing defensive back, but Waylon Free is 6'2", Quincy Bonner is 6'2". You've got a number of 6'1", 6 feet guys, and as subtle as that sounds, maybe that earns Georgia Southern an interception or two. Maybe the extra length gets them a fumble recovery or two they didn't have. And I say that because a year ago, Georgia Southern only forced 9 turnovers.
Yeah.
That was the lowest number they forced in program history. And that was a year after they led the country in forcing turnovers. So something as simple and as subtle as that, if you look at turnover margin by the end of the year and say, well, last year it was -8, this year it's plus whatever. Maybe it's something like that that can help the difference. And, of course, understanding scheming and get pressure on the quarterback and being in the right spot, of course. But something is having those couple of extra inches height-wise, you never know how that's going to be able to assist you for teams that are going to throw the football.
You talked about a couple of your conversations that you were able to have. We've mentioned it a couple of times, being able to talk to the new leader for this defense in one of the summer sit-downs in Will Harris. You talked to Rip Rowan last week as part of your getting to know segment. What's the feel that you get talking to these guys that are leading this defense of what it's supposed to look like?
There is a hunger to get it right. And for all the newness, outside of Kevin Woodley, none of these coaches have been here.
Yeah.
But it's the idea that they have seen it. A lot of them have seen how this is done at the highest level, the Power 5 level, the national championship caliber level. And it is a snapshot of what is happening all around us, not just with football, but across all of athletics. On the field, these guys are going and getting it, and you would never know that 12 months ago this team was 3-9.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know that because they are attacking every day. They are playing like a team that is motivated, but they're playing like a team that is bought in. And I know that you need to see a team on the other sideline that doesn't know your plays and doesn't know your tendencies to truly see how they're going to attack. Maybe Morgan State isn't the best way to start that, but the schedule is the schedule. On another hand, maybe that's exactly what you need to start a season.
Yeah.
But whatever is in front of this team, know that the mentality and the way that they have gone about it, it seems that, and I think we talked about this last week, whether it's talking with Rip, whether it's been talking with Will or Brian, or Turner, any of these coaches, the mentality seems to be there.
Yeah.
It's just when the lights go on September the 3rd, if they can make the transfer from practice to live game.
And the thing that I've really noticed, especially at practice and especially in the live periods and team periods, you see a confidence from this team that I don't know that you've seen the last couple of years. Even the years where some of the wins were there, there's a different confidence, and there's a big difference between confidence and cockiness. And a lot of people know how I feel about the latter. But there's a confidence about this group, and we talked about it last week, how the offense scored 2 touchdowns at the end. One got called back by Coach Helton, and the offense wasn't happy about it, and the offense just flooded onto the field twice. But earlier we talked about how the defense was singing, they were swaying together, but that's what you've got to have at this stage in preseason, and you've seen that really from the word go.
We just talked about with the coaches, they know what success looks like because they know what it takes to do it at the highest level. With these players, the transfers that have been brought in, they've won. Waylon Free, 2 double-digit win seasons at Fresno. Jalen Denton, they just won 10 games at Ole Miss last year. For all the flack that Lane Kiffin seems to take nationally, he knows how to call an offense. He was great at FAU, but Ole Miss just won 10 games last year with Matt Corral. I know that he is gone, and what they do isn't necessarily important to this conversation. But for the freshmen that have been brought in, you want freshmen that have been a part of winning programs, state championship programs. O.J. Arnold ran for more than 300 yards in that state title game last year for Brooks County. Yeah. Under-recruited because it's Class A. Georgia Southern probably found one of the many diamonds in the rough because they went to all 159 counties in this state to find someone like that. Kevin Whitley was huge in helping him get to Georgia Southern. And then for the guys that are veterans on this roster, they were here in 2018 potentially for a 10-win season, for a bowl victory. They were here for a bowl appearance in 19. They were here for a bowl appearance in 20. Yes, there have been some failures and some shortcomings on the field, but a lot of the guys that suit up have seen success. Yeah. So even if there are momentary lapses, if there's a drop ball, if there's a turnover, so many guys out there know what success looks like, and they know it's just a matter of time if they do the right things, they're going to see it. They're going to see the fruits of all that labor.
That wraps up our season preview of what the 2022 Eagles will look like on the defensive side. We'll talk about special teams next week. We may have to bring in a special teams expert to...
Do we know anyone?
I think we could find one. Tim Foley might be available.
I don't. Maybe Pat Parker.